but in the United States. At this time, I'm going to introduce Nicole Ziba from the city of Reedley to say a few words about this situation and what she's been doing at the city of Reedley. Nicole?
Thank you, Paul, and thank you to all of you for showing up on somewhat short notice. We really felt it necessary. You know, we've been trying to get word out there that as soon as we are sort of unmuzzled, we want to get word out to the public when we can. So as brief as this is, we felt it very necessary to be able to sit in front of all of you to say, we have news, things are moving, there is movement along the path. We are not simply looking in the rearview mirror as to what happened, but we're looking forward into the future to finalize abatement of the Reedley Lab, and then to make changes to our state and federal system to make sure that what has happened in the past is not going to happen again, not in Reedley, not in Fresno County, and really what we're here to say is we don't want this to happen anywhere else in this country, and it can if we don't continue to call on Congress for further action. So the news that we came out to share with you today is that yes, in fact, I have been served with a congressional subpoena, very happily served with a congressional subpoena, because what that means is that Congress is taking us seriously, and bipartisan Congress is taking us seriously. We don't need partisanship in this issue. Each and every one of us, regardless of what political affiliation we have, needs to be safe in this country. So we're very happy that Congress is taking this seriously, and by issuing a subpoena, they are able to access documents that the city has that would not be disclosable otherwise during an investigation. So I have been asked by several of you if you can see the documents that we gave to Congress. Unfortunately, no, a congressional subpoena is a very strong thing, as you probably all know from the press we see. So I'm not able to share those documents, but I am able to share with you that we did get this subpoena. We are very happy about it. And we have turned over documents to the congressional folks that flew in from D.C. late last week. We do anticipate that we will be seeing a report from them in the very near future. We've heard it could be as soon as a week or two from now, and we're happy about that they can move that quickly. We frankly wished the other agencies in the federal government could move this quickly because we've been at this with this Reedley Lab abatement for months now. So what we are here to also say is, please, Congress, do not stop at this step. Do not stop at this report. We would like hearings. We would like the American public to know what has happened, and we would like the American public to know what it is, Congress, that you're going to do about this to protect all of us around this country in the future. So I also do want to mention to you, because we are able to now, that we did have the EPA on site last week. That shouldn't be a surprise to too many folks. We did share previously that we knew the EPA was planning to come out to the site. They are doing Reedley a favor, so to speak. They are going to be getting rid of and disposing all of those lab chemicals. They're very typical lab chemicals, but they have the capacity to dispose of those. A small rural city like Reedley does not. They're picking up the tab for that. For a small city like Reedley, that would be terribly expensive, to the tune of probably $130,000 to $150,000 to dispose of those lab chemicals. So we're thankful to the EPA. They were on site last week assessing. They got called off to Maui. They will be back in a few weeks to go ahead and dispose of those chemicals. From that point, because your natural question is going to be what next after that for the Reedley abatement, well, then we're left with 500,000 pregnancy tests and COVID tests that the FDA and FDB, which is the California branch of the FDA, they'll step in and destroy. So we are getting close to the abatement process, or finalizing that Reedley Lab abatement, and we're thankful for the EPA's help in that and the FDA's help in that and other agencies that have been a part of that. Now, you may also have heard that there are folks on site today in Reedley. That's the FDA. Again, they're just assessing, doing their thing. But you also probably heard late last night, early this morning, that Reedley's City Council took an important step for our city in placing a temporary moratorium on any new laboratories or warehouses coming into our city that have a BSL level of 2 through 4. So let me explain to you what that is. The CDC categorizes labs by biosafety hazard level, BSL, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 being labs that work with things that are not infectious to humans at all. So think, for instance, an agricultural lab that's doing produce genetics or something like that. 4 being the other extreme end Ebola, anthrax, things that you and I wish didn't even exist in this world. No, I do not believe that we would get a BSL-4 in Reedley. Nonetheless, we're putting a temporary moratorium on any lab that could have any infectious disease. And there are a lot of research and development labs in this country that we are all unaware of. In researching this and in going through this, the city of Reedley has learned an awful lot about what happens in this country. We have learned, for instance, that you can purchase infectious diseases from companies in this country. We have learned that you can import infectious diseases from other countries if you have a special permit. Once those are on site in the country, you can then sell those infectious diseases. We have learned that you can buy from a catalog genetically modified mice, genetically modified for various purposes. I'm watching some of your faces in here and realizing that you are learning just like we had to learn. This is something that this country needs to know about and determine how it wants to proceed with this to keep us all safe. And that, again, is why we're here. Congress, don't stop where you are. Don't stop in the investigation. We need hearings, we need the public to know, and we need fixes that are bipartisan. So the moratorium that the city put in place, again, will temporarily halt any new research and development labs that are privately funded. We do have an exemption for what we call CLIA-regulated labs, and those are labs that are regulated by the state and federal government. Those won't be impacted, so our hospital will not be impacted, our medical offices, clinics, Quest laboratories, not impacted by this. But the city wants to take the step of amending its zoning code to make sure that if we ever do get a lab coming in, a privately funded research and development lab, that we are able to know that they're here, we know what they have on site, we know where they're going to go, and that part of our zoning code is to make sure that we never have one next to a school. This particular lab, as you know, 850 I Street, illegal in every way. So what we did last night would not have kept bad actors from doing what they did, but it was next to a school and a supermarket, a police department, water towers. We don't want that anywhere in the future. So the moratorium is important as we work on the city's zoning code, but more importantly, we have been working with the county on I call it a midterm solution, a more comprehensive solution for this county so that we don't have a patchwork of 15 different cities in the county doing different things to try to protect their citizens. We're very happy about that, and the county will discuss that in just a moment. So I want to just put an exclamation point on what I have said to you before. We are thrilled that Congress is looking into this. We are thrilled that there are multiple committees looking into this, that it is bipartisan. We know that they are conducting the investigation, and we're here to call for further action from Congress on that. So I'll be available after this press conference if you have any specific questions about the city of Reedley. And now I will turn it over to David Lucchini. I consider him now a partner in crime in all of this to talk about what the county's doing.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. David Lucchini, Director of Public Health, Fresno County. So we were not subpoenaed, but the attorneys, congressional attorneys, did want to talk to us and ask us our experiences and kind of our solutions, and so we were happy, Joe and I, who's the assistant director, to speak with them. And a couple of areas we wanted them to address at a national level are areas with regulations of labs, looking at how public labs are regulated to how private labs, especially research and development labs, are regulated. Second is looking and tracking how things are tracked and inventoried when viruses are sent from another country to the United States, especially viruses that are used for lab purposes. How is that inventoried? During this experience, it was very difficult to see if there was proper tracking of viruses that come from other countries. So to go a little deeper dive in these two areas, I wanted Joe Prado, who's the assistant director, but he also has spent a lot of years overseeing our public health lab to kind of go in these two areas that we think are great long-term solutions at a national level. And then I'll come back and finish my points.
Hello, everybody. Joe Prado. So when I met with the congressional attorneys, one of the first point is, what is a potential solution here? So Fresno County, you've been good about identifying there's a gap, that privately funded research labs have no regulation or oversight. What could be a potential solution? And the answer was quite simple, I thought. The simplicity is today we do regulate labs in the United States of America, and we do it through a federal regulation, the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments Act. That there provides the entire United States the infrastructure to actually provide the oversight for these type of labs. And so there's an infrastructure in place in every state in the United States. And so that is an opportunity there. There is specific language in the Code of Federal Regulations that excludes research lab. Let's delete that paragraph. Is it that simple? I'm sure there's a little more to it. There's a United States code that needs some amendment as well. So these were some of the solutions we were putting on the table for consideration as far as addressing this issue here. Furthermore, there is a Center for Disease Control import permit. That is for when you import infectious diseases agents from outside of the country. That is required in the United States for you to do that. The tracking of this import permit actually had some difficulties. In this particular situation, this is where the federal agencies really need to dive in a little bit more and assess this whole permitting process and assessing whether or not is it allowed to be transferable. And that is the thing with tracking of these permits here, is that when they're allowed to be transferable, there's issues with that. And so those were some of the two main pieces in that congressional interview we had with those attorneys there, and kind of speaking into that there. So as we were ending the conversation, any other points, anything else, and really what we asked them is, it can't stop here. We, City of Reedley, County of Fresno, all of our partners, and I'm including our federal and state partners, we agree there is a gap here in our national laboratory security, and we need to address that. How we do that, we want to be at the table as a solution. That is one thing we had during this entire response. There was a local voice at the table. So we definitely encourage them to have a local voice at the table when these decisions are being made, because it does definitely impact the local communities as well. So I'll send it back over to David Lucchini.
So once again, the focus in the county's efforts were ensuring that there was long-term change to solve this issue and close the loop at the federal and state level. You got to remember, so we brought in our partners because we were looking for that knowledge base. How do we get through these things, especially when we're talking about the biologic, the lab mice. And until we hit walls where there was not that solution, then we had to go back to the local angle and see what limited powers we had to move things forward. The additional thing, which we're very proud of bringing these state and federal partners, as we've heard, the people behind this businesses were doing these in other counties, other states, and even other countries. So this was really, I think, because I haven't heard from any of our partners, this is the first time all of us talking together and tracking this. So it was important for us to work together. I know my board hears me say it all the time, we tend to be siloed, and we've got to get out of these silos to do a better job and oversight of these things. So the county didn't wait around, and we really was critical to bring in these partners to get us through this and to understand these loopholes that Joe's talking about. So it was really the first time, and this is why we were a little surprised when we're talking to our partners, that they've ever had something of this magnitude. So we've been meeting for weeks. We continue to meet on this issue as we're going through, hopefully finally getting all the stuff out of this facility. So we need long-term solutions. You're going to hear the same thing. You heard from Nicole, from our board, from Paul, the CAO, Joe. You can't have locals solve these issues. This is a national issue. We've got to plug this hole. I think these are reasonable, simple solutions. And we need this for the good of the nation. It is not fair for local health jurisdictions to come up with how many counties do we have, how many local cities, and they're all going to create their own ordinances across this nation to solve this issue. This is a national issue. Let's fall under one rule. So we are hoping this leads the way, and we really don't want to see local governments having to deal with this in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Joe, and thank you, Nicole. I just also want to take a moment to mention just the level of collaboration that I saw between the county and the city working together on this, and just appreciate that continued partnership. A couple of things we want to just re-emphasize here as we bring this to a close. A state and federal fix is needed. This is not something that can be shouldered at a local level. It will be a patchwork of different solutions in different places. It deserves a federal coordinator. When these meetings were convened, when there was no one at the federal level taking the lead, at one point I think we've had up to 14 agencies that were being led, and the coordination was at the local level. we feel that should have been and should be in the future at the federal level. And we're hopeful that with congressional oversight and action that that will change. Number two, it's a call for action, a call that not just congressional public hearings, but congressional action to close this federal loophole once and for all. And then number three, more transparency from agencies who have jurisdiction. As the County of Fresno worked with these agencies, as you know, there were multiple times that in an effort to catch those who were doing this, there was a request to the county to not share information while they were trying to catch those who were doing this. And although we appreciate this, the county in the end is in this place where we're now sharing this information, but we're working with these partners and we're calling on them for more transparency. And so as we bring this to a close, we're here now to answer any questions that you may have on anything that you've heard here today.
One thing I want to ask, and you guys touched on the mice genetically modified, ready to be purchased online or whatever. When you got this lab, did that, did they bring them in themselves? Can you even tell us about that?
You want to give it a shot? So I will tell you that there is lots of investigation still underway, and there are lots of questions still to be answered. And one of the reasons that we're here in front of you is we are not getting answers either in some cases, right? So we would like to know, and in doing our own research, right, as a small rural city, we are doing our research and finding out you can buy genetically modified mice. We would like for that to be coming from the federal government. We would like to understand some things that are happening. So what I can tell you is that we have appreciated the partnership that we've had thus far. The agencies have stepped in to help us, to help pay for things, like I mentioned, the EPA. But at this time, we still feel like there are many answers that we're looking for. The city of Reedley citizens deserve answers. Our city has been through a lot. This is a lot for a small town to take, and we deserve answers too.
And as the case of, the federal government agencies, you have just so many different hands kind of in the pot, and one saying, well, we're working on something, so don't give us any heads up. Is that kind of what the deal is?
I will say that what I'm seeing over the course of months, and remember, we have been at this for months with these agencies, and they have been superb in terms of the interagency coordination with us. We are having bi-weekly Zoom calls with all of these agencies, many people on these calls. But it's clear that a federal coordinator would have been much quicker, more efficient, and really better at getting to some of these solutions rather than waiting for the local agency to come up with the solution that then the federal agencies assist with. So, any other questions?
We're going through the legal reviews, and we're hoping, hopefully, sometime bringing this ordinance in sometime October, maybe early November. Is anybody nodding their head? Green? Okay, good. It would, hopefully it's not needed because it would be a better oversight at the federal level. That's always the goal. You remember the federal and the states, they kind of set that minimal standards, and then always the locals can always be more strict, not less strict. And we'd like to see a nice, solid regulation from at the national level.
Do you want to share what it'll do, David, specifically?
So this one, you want to cover this one? Because you took, because you got a lot more. of
Yeah.
this.
What we're considering at the county level is the Department of Public Health would do annual inspections, and we're going to be evaluating the environmental controls that are in place, that should be in place for a biosafety lab 2, 3, 4, whatever that may be. But also not, in addition to that, do they have the right permits? Do they have all the other, are they disposing of their waste appropriately? In addition to that, reviewing their protocols and reviewing the infectious agents they have on hand, because the infectious agents you have on hand actually dictate your biosafety level. We want to be able to dive into those deep protocols to see what exactly is happening in that particular lab. So to your question about the federal regulations, we're going to review those federal regulations to see how deep they really go, to see whether or not they're sufficient enough to keep our community safe. Yeah, so it will include that as well. So as going out on site, if they actually meet the threshold for the hazardous materials, that would be included in that inspection as well. That team will be a dynamic team. That will be a combination of our environmental health team and our laboratory team. So we have a microbiologist and we have a lab director that's going to be a coordinated effort to do these inspections. We don't. We don't. So pretty much that's a coordination with the state when there's any issues with that. So there is still going to be some issues on the chemical side. We're going to have to work with the state. But on the biologicals, with the proposed ordinance, we want to mitigate as much as we can within our authority within the ordinance.
Would the biologicals that were found at the Reedley lab fall under your scope? So I think that you guys have jurisdiction
Yes.
over those?
After the ordinances, if the ordinance is passed by our Board of Supervisors, they would come into play, and then it would fall under the Department of Public Health.
Nicole mentioned that some folks in Congress didn't want to take the ordinance.
So we had 3 individuals fly in from DC, and I want to just express how great our interaction was. So these were attorneys from DC that represent the congressional committees that are looking into this.
We've heard talk about possible Chinese government involvement, as a lot of people. Is there any proof that the Chinese Communist Party or the government as a whole is involved in this really?
We've not uncovered any direct connect at our level of investigation, but again, we are not privy to the investigations that these federal agencies are doing. So to have a small rural city like Reedley trying to investigate a communist Chinese tie is pretty difficult. We would ultimately hope that this is being investigated at a very deep level. Right now, I cannot answer the question, though. Yeah.
Local agencies were leading the investigation, also the local agencies were leading the, why didn't you refer to FBI or?
Well, locals weren't leading all the investigations. Locals are leading the coordination of all these agencies. And that's where we felt like really the federal government, or at least CDPH, should have stepped in to oversee. So you have a city manager. We don't even have a public health department in the city of Reedley, right? Our local cities don't. Really trying to coordinate 14 different federal agencies and make sure that everybody's getting information and sharing information and making sure investigations are going on. So we are not leading investigations, but we are leading coordination. Tim? Yeah, Wednesday of last week. Yeah.
How difficult will it be to, I guess, it's fine and dandy if we get these ordinances, future labs, but labs that are already in existence kind of gone under the radar, how do we figure out to do something?
I think that's a fabulous question. And what I would say is I really hope Congress is looking at that. From a local agency's perspective of the ordinance that we're working on or the temporary moratorium we put in place that impacts new labs coming in, any existing businesses though, we are actually going through our business licenses to see who we have within the city of Reedley. Our zoning code will help as we amend our zoning code on that. So that's a great question, and it's something that is one of those elements that we're still taking steps forward in. Yeah.
So under the county ordinance, it would be applicable on day one. So, so within the unincorporated area, we could look at existing labs that exist that actually fall outside of the Clinical Laboratories Improvement Amendments Act. So every lab today that deals with human specimens that actually is funded through Medi-Cal, Medicare, they're actually under those regulations today. So your doctor's offices, your general laboratories, they're under those regulations. Those are not what we're talking about here. We're speaking to the ones that fill this gap today, and if the Board of Supervisors approve that ordinance, that would come effect that day.
So is that like a case of then you have a code enforcement that will start going through records and checking and kind of doubling back to see who made?
Yeah, and so nobody has to report to us, right? And so as we enact this ordinance, we're going to need to create a reporting mechanism. And I don't know how many illegal labs are going to actually report to us. We're going to have to actually go out and see what we can do to find them. But the ordinance will only apply to the unincorporated area. We will offer to every city in the county of Fresno to adopt a resolution to designate the county of Fresno Public Health Department as their inspector of these particular sites. So we could have a more holistic approach in really addressing this in the other jurisdictions.
What would your confidence then be with, I mean, obviously the city of Fresno and the town have been butting heads a lot lately to try try and do something like that, do you feel they would probably say, no, we're good, we want to do our own investigation?
You know, we're definitely open to a conversation with the city of Fresno and see if they're open to that. So once we draft the ordinance and resolution, we're definitely going to propose this to all of the cities in the county of Fresno. I'm not sure of the city process, but the county process would be a first and second reading.
Just one quick comment. You know, as to, I know Joe mentioned being hopeful with the city of Fresno, but I think we need to be clear here. Joe was talking about the expertise that's in the public health department. So we're talking about environmental health who has expertise, but also our public lab staff who have expertise in this area. So I would think that any city that is interested in that would want those who are experts involved in that. My apologies.
Yeah, I will just tell you that this is something we've been working on with the county for a little while now. Obviously, it's very important to the city of Reedley. So we've taken the step of reaching out to the other 13 cities, city managers, to tell them what we're doing, to inform them. We have many cities who are watching what we're doing and are eager to talk with us and are eager for the draft to come forward. So I really do think that Fresno County can set the standard for the nation of cities that come together with the county and work on this together until a national solution can be found. So.
Oh, yeah. I just want to say, and this is why the national solution is important. We're fortunate we have this expertise. Not every county jurisdiction in this country has that access to microbiologists and all that. So this really needs a federal solution, because otherwise it becomes a whack-a-mole. These businesses, these types of labs will find the path of least resistance, and this is what happens. So we'll do a great job locally, but someone else is going to have to deal with this. So go ahead. The conversations have been a lot less when we hear from our partners, especially when everything started hitting the media. There was a lot less discussion. I know on our end, we never hear from them anymore. So, yeah. So this is why, you know, one of the reasons why I wanted to listen to our partners is when they were encouraging us to not go so much into the media was because they were trying to gather this information from these businesses. So, this is for me or for the group? Yeah, well, that's exactly what we need to learn from. And how do we deal with that at a national level? Is how do you, first, is there a national registration of labs? How do you legally do these CLIA regulations? What was the full term? I can't memorize that acronym.
Clinical Laboratory Improvements Amendments.
Those things are very strict. The stuff that we have to go through to be a lab as a publicly funded, there's a lot of things. So at least if the private labs had to do some of the stuff that you have to do with publicly funded labs, it's going to be easier to catch the bad actors. Is everything 100%? I'm sure there's always a small gap, but we got to tighten it much more than what it is now. Now it's too easy.
So I think there's opportunities with business permits. So, and we don't, and so at the city level or county level, is there an opportunity as we have discussions with our local cities when business permits are added and the operational statement says lab, guess what? Flag it. Flag it, send it over to the Department of Public Health if you sign that resolution, and we can get them on the queue to actually do inspections. How we found really was an amazing code enforcement officer out there. All of our code enforcement officers, let's do some training. Let's do some training on what to look for and what to see. When you see a biosafety cabinet, what does that even look like? Let's do some training on that as well. So I think it's going to take all of us working together to know what we're looking for. And if there is, make a referral over to the Public Health Department and we can get eyes on that facility.
I'll just say that really we need to let the public process play out. So we need to hear from the public before we make comment on that. So I know our board is one which makes all its decisions out in the open. And so until we see the ordinance as written, hear full public comment, really we have no comment on what we think about that. And Paul, I think maybe we've said enough. We can wrap up and maybe do some off-camera interviews with folks that may have additional questions.
I want to thank everybody for being here today. There's a lot of people here, a lot of information. So again, we are available for on-camera interviews in this room. We'll go to any corner of the room. As we get updates, we will continue to keep you apprised. So thank you again for being here today.